You know me.
I have work to do.
Excuse
me,
please. And you can say that you are honest. Let me out.
If I'm going to run a state any way I want to, having the coroner in my hip pocket is a good place to start. But couldn't they have picked one that wasn't so obviously a villain?
Read my lips. I'm not going to comment.
Eventually there was a second autopsy. It showed some interesting results.
One of the things that we learned from the second autopsy was that Don Henry had been stabbed and Kevin was crushed in the face with the butt of a rifle, most likely. One of the very interesting things about Kevin's facial injury was that it was a pattern wound and there was massive swelling and bruising around his eye, which was clear indication that that injury occurred before death. The weight of their lungs was nearly 3 times the weight that they should have been for a person their age, and were filled with blood, which was clear proof to the other pathologists who examined the case that the boys did not die with the impact of the train.
Things got real spooky, real quick in this story, beginning with the first grand jury inquiry into the boys' deaths.
We learned during grand jury testimony that one of the officers in charge had actually ordered the scene be worked as an accident, despite the fact that one of the deputies there was asking for CID officers and was very suspicious immediately of the scene. One of the major bungles that they made was Chuck Talent, who was a criminal investigator, used the rear end of the train as a reference point in locating different evidence and things along the tracks. And of course, when the train left the scene, they had absolutely nothing. None of the evidence was handled properly. They literally fanned out about 4 deputies across and walked the point of impact to where the bodies were, and whatever they found they simply dumped in black garbage bags. Our local investigation was headed by our sheriff, Jim Steed. He later went on television bragging about what a thorough investigation he had conducted, and that he felt very sorry for us as parents, but that he had every confidence in Fahmy Malik's ruling. Their investigation was so thorough that they left my son's foot out there for 2 days in plain sight.
Dan Harmon and Richard Garrett, the very same men who had conducted the grand jury investigation of Kevin and Don's murders, were 2 of the main targets of Govar's drug and corruption investigation.
Here's the one-liner from the cliff notes to this case. 7 separate local, state, and federal investigations into the deaths have been stymied, probably because of Harmon.
Whatever comes out of it, if someone's charged or not charged, the grand jury has done a tremendous job.
Harmon led the initial grand jury proceedings in which the deaths got the name everyone that lived there already knew: murder, homicide. But that's as far as the government seemed prepared to go.
We certainly don't have any suspects at this point in time.
It's been quite a while, and I really didn't anticipate that it would take this long when we first started.
Listen to the local press. Bless them. Don't they sound suspicious?
What about the murder? Is it connected at all with the grand jury investigation?
Not that we know of.
McCaskill was a witness in the Bryant train deaths investigation. Although police haven't ascertained a motive for the murder, they say there's no connection.
We link this investigation to the deaths of Don Henry or Kevin Ives, and I don't foresee anything in the pursuance of the rest of this investigation that would be anything that would make me change my mind.
And an embarrassing number of witnesses started turning up Clinton crazy dead. In Arkansas, you quickly learn that it's not true that the local people don't know what's going on. They know. Dan Harmon got indicted, and even in scandal-ridden Arkansas, this was and is big news today.
Accused of racketeering and drug offenses is a free man today. Harmon was released from federal custody yesterday while he awaits his trial. You may remember just last Thursday, Harmon was jailed after refusing to take drug tests. However, during a court hearing yesterday, he told a federal magistrate he would submit to those tests. Harmon maintains he's innocent and says he's a victim of government harassment.
Sir Dan Harmon got out of jail yesterday. A federal grand jury indicted Harmon on 11 counts. He ended up jailed after he refused a drug test. a condition of his freedom until trial.
Harmon went on trial to a buzz of anticipation because of who he is, what he knows, and perhaps most importantly, who he knows. Because if anyone is plugged in with the organized crime conspiracy that Clinton crazies seem to think runs Arkansas, it's him. So we show you the ultimate end to the saga of Dan Harmon in order to get you to understand just how long it's been since responsible authorities knew they had a Dan Harmon problem. So why does it take 10 years to figure it out? Maybe because it's not Dan Harmon's problem. His response to the indictment seemed curiously revealing.
If they can stick some garbage like this on me, then every American better be scared to death.
Well, the system kept me from prosecuting. We actually never got far enough to even issue any indictments, much less to the stage of prosecuting in court.
3 years after the train deaths, Jean Duffy was appointed to head a federally funded drug task force in Saline County. What happened to her will shock you. It shocked us.
The very day, the day that I was appointed to head the drug task force, I was sitting in my office in the prosecutor's office. Gary Arnold walked in, stood in front of my desk, and looked me straight in the eye and told me that I was not to use the drug task force to investigate any public officials. I didn't say anything to him. He turned around and walked out of the office.
Duffy was put in charge of a half-dozen undercover agents. At a certain point in every investigation, her agents bumped up on local government officials in the drug network's distribution chain of command.
When I had hired 7 undercover officers, and they went, of course, had to start street-level buying first, and they couldn't get much above street-level buying before they started connecting public officials to protecting drug dealers, to actually being involved in the drug dealing operation themselves. And the person whose name came up immediately and most frequently was Dan Harmon.
Then, one of her undercover agents dropped a bombshell.
About 3 months after the drug task force was up and running, one of my undercover officers asked if he could open the train deaths case. The train deaths was described as Arkansas's most famous unsolved mystery. It had already aired on 2 separate filming episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. It had gotten national attention. There had at that point probably been 1,000 newspaper articles in Arkansas written about it. There were people who had been turning up dead who were possible witnesses.
This was the second time we'd heard of cocaine raining from the skies over Arkansas.
He said that there were drug drops apparently coming from airplanes in that area, and these drug drops from airplanes had virtually not been investigated by any of the law enforcement agencies in our district, and he thought that was something that our task force needed to look into. He said the drug drops were being made in the exact vicinity where Kevin and Don had been murdered. Scott determined that these low-flying airplanes were dropping packages, and we also developed an informant who was a confessed drug smuggler who told us that she had actually picked up a package of cocaine from that vicinity. So we've got people in that vicinity complaining about low-flying airplanes at night, maybe 6 months prior to when Kevin and Don were murdered. I found it very hard to believe that my undercover officer could see the obvious when the investigators prior to him couldn't see the obvious.
But the information went nowhere. Jean Duffy was the object of a smear campaign in what passes for a free press in Arkansas, and that was that.
My drug task force was shut down cold because we were getting too close. We were not allowed to get there.
Then rebellion set in briefly.
An undercover agent today badmouthed the drug task force and quit. He says there's too much dirt behind the scenes. Scott Llewellyn was a special agent for the drug task force. He quit today. He worked in the 7th Judicial District, which serves Saline, Grant, and Hot Spring counties. Llewellyn says that district is immersed in a reign of corruption that has important and powerful connections to political, judicial, and law enforcement officials. He says as an undercover officer, he gathered evidence of illegal activities, but says for some reason the Drug Task Force chose to ignore him. Llewellyn says he quit because of the firing Friday of Gene Duffy, who was the Drug Task Force administrator.